Yeah, I know, dude. It looks like a
No, that thing in the middle looks naked.
black and white.
So, skeletal.
Okay, where are my cards? All right, what kind of muscle do we have here, Morelia? This is skeletal muscle. Sorry. Who's your new partner? Okay, just checking. So I'm gonna go ahead and label this skeletal muscle. Please do the same. How did you know this is skeletal muscle, Morelia? Because there is a tendon? Did you guys figure out what the heck this is supposed to be right here?
A bone.
This is actually supposed to be a bone. So this is a muscle attached to a bone. So one way to tell that something is a skeletal muscle is if it's attached to bone. With your newfound partner, you're going to discuss a couple of other characteristics that are exclusive to skeletal muscles. So what are some other ways you could identify it? Go ahead and discuss.
They're not branched out.
All right, Zach, what is your partner's name now? Alexis. And what did you and Alexis Ravago discuss?
We discussed it has multiple nuclei.
Skeletal muscle are multinucleated. Thank you. So there's multiple nuclei per cell. What is another feature of skeletal muscle? Christian?
It has light and dark striations.
There will be light and dark striations. And then there's two other things I'm going to have you add. They are also very long cells. Long and thread-like. And then based on your vocabulary, are skeletal muscles voluntary or involuntary? They're voluntary, which means you choose when you want to move them, how much to contract, when to relax. Except sometimes, you know, when you like fall asleep in class and then you twitch yourself awake, then it's involuntary. But for the most part, it's voluntary.
Why does that happen?
Because it's funny. All right, so you know how usually, or on the very first drawing handout that I gave you guys, we labeled all the parts like on the drawing. But then I was like, wait, if you wanted to study this, the answers are like right there on the picture already. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna number the parts. We're gonna write the name of the part to the side or underneath it. So wherever you have space, okay? So this very first small structure in the corner here, this very long noodle looking thing, we're gonna number 1. And then to the side, if you have space or underneath, wherever you prefer, I'm gonna put number 1. Number 1 is pointing at a cell that makes up a muscle, aka a muscle. You would think so, right? But nah, they call it muscle fiber. It's basically just a cell, so I'm gonna put that in parentheses. This is gonna take you a minute, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have you count up how many muscle fibers do we have in this image. This is one of them. Every single one of these circles is one muscle fiber. Go ahead and count them up, see if you can figure it out or guesstimate how many we have.
Too many.
I need a number.
6.
Each, and all of the entire muscle? The entire muscle?
728.
There are some behind it. So that's why we're guesstimating, because we can't get a real number. Huh? Well, here alone, there's like over 10 in this piece alone. And then each one of these is one too.
I got like 80. I got 94.
It's gonna be around 90-ish. So the way I did it was, you guys see how the muscle fibers, there's about 12 or 13 in this one? And then I just multiplied it. Well, here's another stack times another. So it's gonna be around 80, 90 something, okay? So I'm gonna put, there are approximately 90-ish cells or fibers. Oh, you're talking about the spongy bone? That's fun. Just kidding, right? Haha. Okay. This way when you study, you're like, okay, well, I don't know what number one's really pointing at. Is there only one muscle fiber in a muscle? And it's going to be like, no, there's 90. Oh, each one of these is one muscle fiber here. Okay. So these cells, like all cells, are made up of, made of proteins. We're going to learn the types of proteins later. Many nuclei, of course. Each cell has many nuclei. And of course, each cell has other organelles such as mitochondria. There are more organelles inside of each cell, but we're just going to keep it simple here. With your partner, go ahead and see if you guys can figure out from bio, what is the function of a mitochondria? Why do cells have them? All right. Lorenzo, what is the function of mitochondria?
It gives energy to the cell and its organelles.
It gives energy to the cell and the other organelles. Thank you. Your bio teacher would be very proud. Okay. So in a skeletal muscle, then, would you expect a lot of mitochondria or just one? A lot. You need a lot of energy in order to move your muscles. Okay. Notice each muscle fiber is surrounded by this kind of like grayish color, this light gray color. That light gray color is actually connective tissue. So between each muscle fiber, we have connective tissue. So we're going to label this as number 2. Yeah, the really light gray space. So the muscle fibers are the darker gray circles, and then between each darker gray circle, there's some space. And it's actually not space, it's actually connective tissue called endomysium. Can you please say endomysium? Endomysium. All right, so it's actually connective tissue. That surrounds and separates muscle fibers. So I'm going to shorten the word muscle. You can write it out if you'd like. So there's a lot of endomysium between each muscle fiber. Notice there's a lot of endomysium in this bundle here, a ton of endomysium over here, more over here, and that's what this top label is pointing at. So this top one is also pointing at endomysium. So I'm going to add a 2 here as well. So endomysium in between all these muscle fibers. So then notice how in the muscle you have a collection of muscle fibers. Each one of these bundles is called a fascicle. And that's what this label right here is supposed to be pointing at. So we're going to number this number 3. 3 is known as a fascicle. That's F-A-S-C-I-C-L-E. Can you please say fascicle?
Fascicle.
So it's actually a bundle of muscle fibers. I'm going to give you guys a second to count how many fascicles do you have in this picture and then tell your partner. All right, so the magic number is 7. There are 7 in this picture. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 back here, 5, 6, and 7. Depending on what kind of muscle, how large, the number of fascicles will vary. It's not like there will be 7 in every single muscle. Notice each fascicle is covered in this outer layer here. So this outer layer here and this layer here. So that's what this number 4 is pointing at. 4 is pointing at the outer layer of a fascicle. So I'm going to write 4. The outer layer of a fascicle is called perimysium. Can you please say perimysium? Perimysium. So this is actually also connective tissue. I'm going to shorten that to connective tissue. Feel free to write it out if you'd like. That surrounds and separates so perimysium surrounds and separates. What are these bundles called again? Fascicles. Notice that all of the bundles of fascicles, they're actually bound together with this outermost layer. This outermost layer all the way out here covers the entire length of the muscle and goes all the way to the bone. So this outermost layer is what this one's pointing at. So this is going to be our number 5. So I think of number 5 as like the candy wrapper. You know the candy wrappers on like Tootsie Rolls and Smarties where they get twisted at the end? So it's kind of like that. So number 5 is like the candy wrapper that holds everything in. This is the epimysium. Can you please say epimysium? Epimysium. So this is connective tissue that surrounds the entire muscle. Epimysium. Okay, so let's say we're back to that Tootsie Roll comparison. Tootsie Roll has a wrapper on the outside, so that's like the epimysium here. And at the very end, you know how the candy wrapper is twisted at the very ends, and there's no candy in the twisted ends, but there's still paper? That's kind of like the epimysium. Notice there's no muscle over here, but there's still epimysium. Okay. What is the name of the epimysium, though, if it's connected to bone now? It is tendon. So number 6 is the extension of epimysium there. It is called tendon. It's actually just epimysium. Continuing from the muscle to form a connection with the bone. One last thing that's not very clear in your printout is in between each fascicle, there's actually a little tube. So I'm just going to draw in a few more tubes in between each fascicle. So just draw those in, 1 or 2 between each fascicle. These tubes are actually blood vessels. So number 7 is going to be blood vessels. So number 7, we're going to label that blood vessels. So the cells inside of the muscle fibers, they need blood, so they need oxygen, nutrients. They also need waste to be taken away from them. So they're blood vessels. And lastly, if you couldn't tell that this was a bone, then you should probably label this as bone. It's okay. It's been mistaken all day. What shape of bone is this? Is this short, long?